Thank you, Freeholders, for allowing me to come and present to you today, and I truly appreciate that. When this first came up, this kind of came as a result of constant attempts to rehabilitate certain areas of the courthouse. And I guess at a certain point, we addressed the issue of whether we can continue doing this and how long we can continue doing this. And that's how this came about, at least our concerns in terms of the court. We have some slides up and just some small examples of issues that we have faced and will continue to face in the future if there is no additional space for us. Right now, our space is nearly impossible to modify. We are compartmentalized into tiny small rooms throughout the entire complex, both in this building and the building across the street, the main courthouse. Two examples of that, and these are not the only examples, but we wanted to keep it small. You can see two offices that we've converted. Both of these offices are actually closets that were converted into offices for staff. And that's because we're running out of room. We're pretty much at full capacity, and when I say that, I can tell you that I am constantly going to the facilities manager, Chris Walker, and asking him if there's any available space that we can take for our own staff, and we're at our limits at this point. It's very difficult for the courts to maintain operational efficiencies when we have members of divisions in this building, in the building across the street, separated by floors in small offices where we don't have the ability to centralize supervision, oversight, or to make things run smoother. That means cases take longer to process in the long run. So we would like to see if we can fix that issue. You can see here in these slides, we've got significant issues when it comes to courtroom space. The first slide that you see there, that is courtroom number 5. That was originally built in 1847. That was originally, if I'm not mistaken, the surrogate's courtroom. You can see wires all over the floors. That's because we don't even have power outlets in many of our offices or rooms. We can't even plug in things. So we'll have wires running from one side of the room to the other. And unfortunately, we've had some significant mishaps in the courtroom with people tripping over wires. There have been lawsuits that have been filed as a result. We've tried to tape them down. We've tried to do everything we possibly can, but in modern day technology, almost everything requires a power source, and there's no way to keep that going with the limitations we have now. We can't even sometimes, attorneys who come into courtrooms can't even plug in a laptop, which is the common thing to do if you're about to begin a trial. We have limitations in size in our courtrooms. Current courtroom specifications, according to the Administrative Office of the Courts, call for much larger courtrooms than we have now, particularly for criminal division. Criminal division requires much larger jury pools because of criminal justice reform. In order to get eligible jurors to sit for long-term cases, we need a lot of people. The maximum we can sit in our largest galleries, with the exception of the historic courtroom, is 49 people. So if you think about it, 49 people may sound like a lot at first. We need to seat, for a long-term trial in criminal, 16 jurors. And for 16 jurors to be yielded, sometimes we need to go through 200 to 300 jurors. Our main jury room, which is our central jury room on the first floor, has a maximum capacity of 105. So you can do the math. If 2 judges ask for juries, and we have 19 full-time judges assigned to Morris, we have 1 vacancy now. If 2 judges ask for juries, we're out of jurors, and we can't call anymore. I have had to, as a result, change jury service from 1 day, one trial to 2 days, one trial, and we may have to consider going to 3 days, one trial if we can't get enough eligible jurors inside our courtrooms. So we actually have physical space issues that affects the processing of trials as we go through, particularly when it comes to criminal trials, which take a long time. We also have long-term civil trials, medical malpractice cases. They take weeks upon weeks, and we need to seat 8 to 10 jurors for those cases. And they also take a much longer time now because we don't have the physical space to put the jurors. We also have no separation. The judges and court staff have no separation between us and the public. Now, it's not that we don't want to see the public, but there are significant problems that happen when particularly judges and immediate courtroom staff have interactions with the public. Often things can be overheard between conversations between clients and their attorneys. If a judge were to hear an overheard conversation, we can't get to our chambers without walking through the crowd that's waiting to get into our courtroom. And if we have to walk to our chambers and we're hearing conversations between an attorney and their client, we actually might wind up being disqualified from the case because we overheard something we shouldn't hear before hearing the case. We also have security concerns, and I think the sheriff's going to address that a little bit later. Significant security concerns, particularly when it comes to our high-impact dockets, such as not just criminal, but domestic violence and landlord-tenant. Those are high-impact, high-emotion cases, places where it becomes a higher security concern, where members of the public may think, or litigants particularly, may think they can interact with the judge, and sometimes in a high-impact type of way. And that would be obviously a security issue. We've had to eliminate our training rooms. Now, we only really had 2 training rooms, one small computer laboratory, and we had a regular training room for classrooms. We have constant training for employees and judges, and we needed a space to put them. We also, unfortunately, under our new guidelines, our original grand jury, which had been in courtroom 5, needed to be moved because the grand jury courtroom where it was in the middle of the highest trafficked area in the entire courthouse. And having it there allowed confidential witnesses, undercover police officers. They were in complete full view of the public as they were coming into the second floor entry into the courthouse, and that was an inappropriate space for them, not to mention the fact that grand jurors could be identified as they walked into the grand jury. So we wanted to move that out of view, and we used our training room, which is now in secured space, in the back areas in order to supply that. That courtroom then became our central judicial processing court, which is administered, and that's the courtroom that you see there up the upper left, and it's also the gallery is in there in the middle. That courtroom is now utilized for our first appearances and releases. It's very difficult for the sheriff department, and the sheriff can get into that, getting prisoners. There's only one entrance and egress from that courtroom. And it's very difficult operating with security-wise, but also just operationally out of one door. The other courtroom you see on the right hand, that's courtroom number 12, and that actually was never a courtroom. That was built as the Freeholders meeting room in 1974 when that building was completed. And we have basically jerry-rigged that courtroom to make it, that room, and to make it a courtroom where it really was never meant to be. You can see there's a bench there. That bench is actually not for seating. That bench is actually the barrier between the gallery and there is no well of the court in that room. So there's actually there's no physical way of separating the well other than just turning around one of those benches, and that's the way it's done. Unfortunately, because of that, we now don't have the ability to seat all the members of the drug court, and so we have nothing but standing room only in that room. So it's really not suited. In the next room, so I told you before, in criminal juries, we have to select 16 jurors. That's 12 seated jurors with 4 alternates, because most of our trials now are long-term trials, meaning they're going to take many weeks. So we pick 4 alternates just in case we lose jurors during the course of the trial. You're seeing right now a group of 16 people. You actually can't see all 16 because they wouldn't fit in the photo. That's my staff, by the way, and I thank them for modeling for that for the moment. That room is 11 feet 4 inches by 15 feet 10 inches for 16 people, and there are no windows in that room. So I have to tell you, if you're a juror, if you're one of those 16 jurors selected for a criminal trial, you're sitting in a closed-in room of 11 by 15 and with no windows, and you're there sometimes for hours, sometimes days, trapped in that room, so to speak, trying to deliberate. So if you can imagine yourself, by the way, there's 2 rows, and you can't see it from the slide, but there's a back row there. There actually has to be 2 rows of seating behind the individual person. If you're a juror and you're trying to deliberate over somebody's liberty, imagine the conditions that you have to be in when you have to deliberate over somebody's liberty. And I don't think anybody here would be jealous of those individuals who have to sit in that room for that period of time. So access to the courthouse is also quite challenging. When I say access, it says here access for disabled. It is absolutely impossible for someone in a wheelchair, a walker, or a cane to get to a certain portion of the second floor of the courthouse because of steps. Steps in which we cannot repair. By the way, that building, for those who don't know, the main courthouse was built in 1827. The sheriff's house, which is the other part of the second floor, was built in 1888, and they were connected sometime in the 1950s, I believe. There are steps there to connect the buildings. The steps are enclosed in hallways, and there's no way for us to even put in handicap ramps in there. So there is none. So if you have difficulty walking, there's virtually no way you can get to courtroom 8 or 9 on the second floor, unless you first go down to the first floor, walk through controlled space through our finance division, by the way, violates IRS guidelines, to get to the other side of the first floor, come up the elevator on the second floor on the other side, and then come across that way. And that's the only way you can get to those courtrooms. And this has nothing to do with anything that anybody's done in this century. It's just this is the way it's evolved over the years. Whenever we consider, and this again will be discussed a little later, consider any repairs in the historic section of the courthouse, and that would encompass 6 courtrooms and a lot of office space. You cannot do those repairs or construction without approval from historic preservation and specialty contractors who can deal with historic buildings. That makes repairs very lengthy. And right now I have 2 leaks in my chambers. Not to say, but we have leaks also in several other chambers. And again, it's just the age of the structure. And to get them repaired takes an extended period of time to get those repairs effected, and it displaces people while it's happening. It's in a crowded place, it makes it that much harder. Vulnerable litigants. So we have a courtroom just not designed, it was never designed. A courtroom that we've set aside because it's the best courtroom possible in our current facility for domestic violence. And right now, although it's part of our best practices to have a waiting room for victims of domestic violence while their proceedings are going on, which is usually monitored by a sheriff's officer and separated so that they don't walk into defendants, we don't have that here because we just don't have the space for it. We do the best we can. And with the assistance of JBWS and the Domestic Violence Working Group, we've tried to make as much accommodations as we possibly can with the limitations of our space. But in effect, what's happening is that victims of domestic violence are being interviewed in open spaces where the defendants can walk past them at any moment. And that's unfortunate, but nothing we can really do. So we have no space for vulnerable litigants. We also have no place for specialty visitors or witnesses. For example, as I indicated before, confidential informants or undercover police officers. We have no space for them right now to come into the courthouse to stay while they're waiting to be called to the stand. We talked about the judges in vulnerable security positions. So we can move on to the next one, thank you. So As you can tell if you've walked through our complex in any recent day, we have not shrunk in size, we're expanding in size, and that's not because we want to expand in size. It's because since the last addition to the courthouse, which completed, I think, in 1974, maybe a little bit earlier, we have grown significantly. In 1974, there were only 10 judges assigned to Morris County. Again, that's the last time we had an expansion of the courthouse. We now have 19. And that's not including a tax court judge, which gets his own courtroom and chambers, which we currently have here in our complex. And not including 3 recall judges, which we currently have, and that's a reduction from 2 years ago when we had 5. We only have 3 right now, but we're going to have another one in April. So we will have up to 4 recall judges in April. We also have 3 hearing officers, and they need hearing office space. They need hearing officer space, which are smaller courtrooms, and we don't have a lot of space for them either. We have spaces that we've been modifying over the time to address them, but right now we have, for example, our domestic violence hearing officer meets in her office with litigants in a closed office because we really don't have space. Our hearing office, we do have a hearing officer room, which is the CJP room, and we have one here in this building on the first floor, but because they overlap in timing, we can't use the same room at the same time. So we have expanded in size because Morris County has expanded in size, and that's why we have more judicial resources that have been assigned to our county, which is a good thing. We've just never modified the space since 1974 to accommodate that expansion. So we're doing the best we can, but we can't do with this much longer. We are getting bigger. We've been assigned with a lot more social programming than we've ever had before, something that never happened in 1974 or even 1992 when the additional 4 courtrooms were given in this building. We now have drug court, which is something we never had before. When I took over as drug court judge in 2011, we had 82 drug court participants in Morris County. We now have close to 230. So we now have to provide services for those 230 participants. Those services are not just substance abuse services, mental health services, housing services, assistance, and aid. All that has to be provided to this very vulnerable population of drug court probationers. So we have to provide it. We just don't have space for it. We want to be able to provide space for mental health particularly because much of our criminal docket can often be populated by people with significant mental health issues. And we have no ability to connect them to services. Some of them don't have homes. And because they have to come see us, we have that extraordinary opportunity to be able to connect them to services right here in this building when they come see us at pretrial services. But we can't do that right now because we just don't have the space for it. In a nutshell, we're growing. We anticipate that we will continue to grow, and we just don't have the space to do it. And so that's when these issues came more to the forefront. And I hope that we can reach some accommodations, that we can provide the citizens of Morris County with the services that they really deserve in their court system, because we really primarily serve the citizens of Morris County. So thank you very much, and I will turn it back over to
Sheriff Gannon.
Sheriff Gannon. Thank you.